Thanks to NIS America, I've been able to play Legend of Heroes Trails into Reverie. So this game is the conclusion to the Crossbelt story arc, which includes notable games like Trails from Zero and Trails into Azura. But that's only part of it. You see, much of the material is also covered in Legend of Heroes Trails of Cold Steel, as well as other mangas and animes alike. Now, that is a lot to cover, and too much to cover, honestly. So I won't be giving hardly any information about the story because, well, it seems like we're games and games into it, and if you're interested in the story, you already know at least a good amount of it, and if you're not, you might be looking for a different point to jump into. And that would be one of my first things I would recommend, is if you're really interested in getting into the series, I would not start here. Now, not because you don't have to, or not because you can't, but just because it may not mean as much to you. But if you don't have over 1,000 hours and you just want to sum up the entire story in a, well, relatively quick snapshot, this might be the way to do it. So the main way I would look at it is watching the Avengers Endgame without watching any other Marvel movie or really consuming any other Marvel product, where yeah, you would understand the story and you would get the main aspect of it, but maybe it wouldn't be as emotional to you, and you definitely wouldn't notice little Easter eggs or even be a little lost when it comes to certain story plots. Now that is, though, without saying you can't do it. Of course you can do it, and maybe for some people that might be the best way to consume some of this, especially looking at Legend of Heroes Trails into Reverie. As I said before, there is literally thousands of hours of lore, gaming, anime, mangas. It's a whole universe that you would have to consume, and for the most part, it's gonna be impossible for you to do that. Even if you have a Nintendo Switch and you have a computer, you might be able to get some of the games, but you're not always gonna be able to get all the mangas, or maybe you can't play all of the games. I know that's part of my issue, as all I have really is the Nintendo Switch, and I have actually played all the games that I could on there, which includes Trails of Cold Steel 3 and 4, and of course the Trails from Zero and Trails into Azura and into Reverie, all of those games. But what I'm telling you is each game probably took over 100 hours, and that's just a lot of time for a lot of people. That's gonna be too much, and honestly, they probably will give up towards the end, unless this is something you really, really love and it's about the only thing you consume. That's a tiny, tiny market share of the video game consumers out there, though. Not that I want to get into analytics, I'm just saying that it is a lot to take in, and so you don't really have to look at it that way when you're looking at Trails into Reverie. You see, because they do a really good job of summing up everything. From the main menu, you can actually read a synopsis of each video game, and that really helps catch you up, especially on the Trails of Cold Steel stuff. Now, personally, I would recommend jumping in at Trails from Zero, because it really gets you to know Lloyd and his whole crew, as well as really understand what this game is, what the heart and soul of it is. And so that leads you into a nice little trilogy, I would say, with Trails from Zero to Trails to Azura and Trails into Reverie. All of these games, I think, are masterpieces. The one thing I will say, though, is when playing Trails into Reverie, the visual presentation, the graphics changed quite a bit. I've spent hundreds of hours with Lloyd Bannon and his crew, getting to know them in this certain visual design and this certain visual aspect, and then when you play Trails into Reverie, everything is super defined, and even exploring Crossbell in a third-person view actually had me lost in a city that I have pretty much known like the back of my hand for quite a long time. So that was all kind of exciting to see these characters and this town in a new light, a much more defined, graphically pleasing light, but also noticing that it in many ways mirrors the graphics of Trails from Cold Steel. And that is your first clue that this game is going to be different, not just graphically and visually, but also from the aspect of what team you're going to be playing as. So yeah, you do have a good amount of time playing as Lloyd and your cohorts, but you're quickly then changed to follow Reen and his students and coworkers, as they also then get you into playing the characters from the Trails of Cold Steel. You don't have to know most of these characters, but it does help a little bit. So again, I would definitely recommend, if nothing else, reading the synopsis of each game. There's 2 storylines that you technically play, with a third one coming up that I'm not going to really get into. The point is instead of it being a game where you just follow one team around and get to know them really well, you're actually playing as 3 different teams, and yeah, that's a lot to undertake. That's a lot to remember, when you're assigning characters different roles and you're understanding who does what better. That is quite a bit, but it doesn't really seem to take too much away from it, because the fact is that once you're stuck in a storyline, you're there for quite a while. so you're able to go and analyze your characters again and decide which one's going to be good for support, magic user, and physical attack, and, this and that. Now, I will say, though, one thing that really bothered me about this game, as I mentioned before, the amount of people who have played all these games and are incredibly excited for this one is a pretty small market share, right? But that is going to be the people who are most interested in buying this game day one. And I think they sort of alienated us in a way by the fact that so much of the game, especially in the first 10 hours it seems like, is just rehashing old stuff. You go around basically re-meeting people that you've already met and especially again if you put hundreds and hundreds of hours into gameplay, you know everyone pretty much, and if nothing else, you've already read the synopsis. So then they make this one of the slowest burns I've ever played in the series. And trust me, most of the games actually start off pretty slow, but they're engaging and interesting, and you want to keep going. Yeah, there's not a lot of action off the top of it, but they always end in a very climactic fashion. But this one, whew, knowing a majority of the characters, being really excited to see how the story ends, it was still an incredibly slow burn and something that was really difficult for me to get into, if I'm being honest, just because I knew that every time I fired it up, I was going to have maybe 1 to 2 more hours of getting to know people. And that 1 to 2 more hours turned into about 10 to 12 hours of rehashing old stuff and slowly pushing that ball forward, getting the story going just a little bit more. But so much of it was just talking about the past. And in so many ways, I'm like, why do you gotta do that? Why do I need to re-meet people I've already met before? And I understand that they're trying to make it more digestible to new users, and I get that, I do. And I don't want new users to come to this game and feel like they're being gatekept by somebody. I'm just saying that as far as the story itself and the game, I feel like they just focus so much of the first part of it on getting to re-know people you've already known, and it goes into a really slow burn. Now, I will say that they do try to mix that up a little bit by sending you on a few missions and getting you back into combat, fighting a few bosses, which really does shake things up and make it really fun. But I will say, it did also kind of ruin things, because looming over all of that fun I knew, it was going to end. We're going to go back to hours and hours of dialogue again, rehashing old story points. And to be honest, I was just excited to start the game loop again and get back out there, kind of have some more freedom, push the story forward and get into new scenarios, fighting new dungeons, new bosses, the whole game loop that we all love, finding new weapons, upgrading your character, all that stuff. But it was rather disheartening knowing that, well, here comes 2 or 3 more hours of dialogue that I gotta read that I've already known, that I've already processed. And that was, like I said, the first part of the game. That was the first 15 to 20 hours of the game. It does get mixed up. There is some really fun aspects, don't get me wrong, but I just knew that there was going to be more dialogue coming up, and it was going to be lengthy, and it was going to be something I was pretty much already aware of. But that does taper off, and the game really does grow out into the story that we wanted it to be. It's very epic and in so many ways satisfying. I wasn't ready to let Lloyd and his team go. This is a group that I really seem to care about, and I want more games from them. And I'm sure, just like the Marvel Universe, we'll see them again. But ending this whole story arc was kind of sad to me, because this is the group that really made me fall in love with the Legend of Heroes games and wanted me to get into this series. I had tried many times before, especially with the Trails of Cold Steel series, and I just couldn't. I didn't really have that same connection that I do with this one. And now I can appreciate it and understand it a lot more, but I needed that jumping in point, and for me, it was the Trails from Zero. So in many ways, this game has the same quality as all of the other ones. I never had any crashes, never had any bugs. I will say that exploring Crossbell in that third-person view was a bit disorienting, and I don't know if that's something that the frames per second were moving around, or if it's just me being used to one aspect of it, or one visual aspect of it, and then it changing up. But either way, it was amazing. This is a great game. For me, this game is easy 9 out of 10, arguably 10 out of 10, but it does come with the caveat that I don't know if you should play it first. You could, and you might really enjoy it. But I also would say that don't write off Trails from Zero or Trails into Azura, as I think that you'll develop much more of an emotional response to this game after playing those. Now, I know that this has not been a typical game review, and this one was really difficult for me because I really didn't want to give any of the story away, especially telling people, hey, you might not even want to start with this game. So if I give you any story info, I'm already already giving you spoilers. And not to mention that, there is so much to this game that it's hard to really wrap up in one video. And I'm not going to do multiple videos because, well, there again, I don't want to give any spoilers away. There's a whole universe in these games that definitely deserves your attention. And for those that want to give it their attention, I don't want to ruin anything. And if you're a person who wants to play last to first, you can definitely do that. And that doesn't really ruin anything, because yeah, you'll know what happens at the end of the story, but most of the game's fun is getting to know the characters, getting to understand what's going to happen. I mean, let's be honest, we're playing video games here. Most of the time, the main characters don't die. Most of the time, shocking things don't happen. So yeah, playing it, essentially last to first does work pretty well. And again, so much of the adventure is running into new enemies, new bosses, and of course getting to know the characters and see how they interact with each other. So that's not off the table either. And I can tell you that with each game, this whole series just gets better and better from a quality aspect and also to a storytelling aspect. They just seem to build off each other, and it's incredibly fun and engaging. But at the same time, it is very, very time consuming. I don't know. That's just my thoughts. Again, I know they were everywhere and nothing was really concrete. I didn't give hardly any scores. I can tell you that this is one of my favorite game releases of 2023, but I don't know exactly who I would recommend it to. I don't know if I should say you should go out and buy it right now or if you should wait. Partially, it's a decision that only you can make. And I would advise not starting here, only because I think so much of the storytelling aspects are really going to hit you if you at least know Lloyd Bannon and his whole crew, far more than if you just go into it without really knowing these guys. But I also completely respect the person who says, I don't got 1,000 hours or even 300 hours, and I just want to know the end of the story, so I'm just going to play it this way. And you know what? It'll work for you too. But anyway, I really, really enjoyed this game. I absolutely adore the Trail series and the Legend of Heroes series in general. The whole universe of it is something that I haven't really been able to get into until recent years, and since I have, I've absolutely fallen in love with this universe. But anyway, again, that's my thoughts on Legend of Heroes Trails into Reverie. Let me know what your thoughts are. Are you guys going to play this game? Are you familiar with the series? Do you like JRPGs? Is this one of those series that you're looking to get into? Or have you been waiting for this game to come out for a while now? Anyway, anything and everything down in the comment section below is so much appreciated. I love each and every one of you. Take care, everyone. Bye-bye.